In the last 4 hours, 2 days official mourning observed after Havana plane crash tragedy. Earlier today, Mexican owner of plane in Havana crash has been subject of 2 complaints. Yesterday, 20 priests among 110 dead in Havana plane crash, more than 100 killed in Cubana Airlines crash in Havana. The aircraft was old. Possible causes behind Havana plane crash. Over 100 people dead in plane crash near Havana, more than 100 killed in Havana plane crash. Cubana flight crashes shortly after takeoff from Havana. Cuban authorities investigate crash of Mexican plane in Havana, more than 100 feared dead in fiery Cuban airplane crash near Havana. Video appears to show Havana plane crash site. Cuba plane crashes near Havana with 104 passengers on board. Cuba plane crash, 100 dead as Boeing 737 goes down in Havana. Top updates: Cuba, at least 100 dead after plane crashes near Havana airport. Video shows fiery mushroom cloud from plane crash in Havana. Plane crashes on takeoff from Havana. Cuba plane crashes near Havana with 104 passengers on board. Video shows large explosion after Cuban plane crashed in Havana, Cuba. Over 110 dead after plane crashes near Havana airport. Cuban plane crashes shortly after takeoff from Havana airport in the last 7 days. At least 100 passengers feared dead in Cuban airplane crash in Havana. More than 100 passengers killed in Havana plane crash. Cuba says witness shares video of plane crash site outside of Havana, Cuba. More than 100 feared dead in Havana air crash. Video, emergency workers on site of Boeing 737 crash in Havana, Cuba. Is this the aftermath of a 2018 plane crash in Havana, Cuba? Over 100 dead after plane crashes near Havana airport. Video, victims rushed from scene of Havana plane crash. Chartered 737 crashes in Havana. Deadly plane crash in Havana leaves over 100 feared dead. Cuba plane crashes after takeoff from Havana airport. Victims rushed from scene of Havana plane crash. Passenger jet crashes near Havana. Mass casualties, at least 100 killed in Havana plane crash. Cuban state media: Boeing 737 crashes on takeoff from Havana airport. Plane with more than 100 passengers on board crashes in Havana, Cuba. Video appears to show Havana plane crash site. 3 passengers critical after plane crashes in Havana. Breaking: Global Air Boeing 737 crashes in Havana. 3 survivors after plane with 104 passengers crashed in Havana, Cuba. Boeing 737 crashes after takeoff in Havana, Cuba. Boeing 737 crashes with 104 passengers aboard in Cuba's Havana. High number of casualties in Havana air crash, says Cuban president. Passenger jet crashes near Havana with at least 110 aboard. Cuban airliner reportedly crashes at Havana airport. Rescue workers on the scene of the plane crash in Havana, Cuba. Passenger plane crashes after taking off from Havana. Plane carrying 104 passengers crashes in Havana. Plane crashes while leaving Havana airport. Video, Boeing 737 crashes shortly after takeoff at Havana airport. Plane crashes in Havana, Cuba, with 104 passengers on board. Boeing 737 with 107 on board crashes on takeoff from Havana airport. Cuban plane crashes shortly after leaving Havana airport. Cuban passenger jet crashes at Havana International Airport. Cuban charter airliner crashes near Havana airport. Plane with 104 passengers on board crashes near Havana, Cuba. Plane crashes upon takeoff in Havana, Cuba, with 104 passengers on board. Passenger plane crashes after leaving Havana with 113 on board. Chartered 737 crashes at Havana airliner. Crashes with 104 people on board after takeoff from Havana. Boeing 737 crashes just after takeoff from Havana, Cuba. Cuban television confirms plane crash in Havana. Spanish Cuban airliner crashes after takeoff from Havana Airport, Cuba. Tragedy, Boeing 737 crashes with 104 passengers near Havana Airport. Boeing 737 crashes after taking off from Havana. Media. Boeing 737 crashes after taking off from Havana. Updated. Boeing 737 carrying 107 crashes near Havana shortly after takeoff. Boeing 737 crashes after Havana takeoff. Passenger jet crashes on takeoff from Havana. Cuban plane crashes on takeoff from Havana. State TV says plane reportedly crashes at Havana's main airport. Boeing 737 crashes after takeoff from Havana. Cuba. Plane crashes in Havana.